Welcome back, friends. In this video, we're going to continue working on our projects, and this time we'll add a grid view to the bottom of the details view so we can display some record information. So let's begin here. First of all, go into the source view for a second and make sure that after the details view, after the closing tag and the details view, you put a BR, and we're putting that there so that we can break down to the next line, okay? So there'll be a space between the details view and then punch a line in there and then place a grid view in that space. From the toolbox, drag and drop a grid view into that space. And of course, once we have the grid view, we need to connect it to, for example, the sales table because we want those records appearing besides just the employee records. So what I'm going to do next is just pull down and after the last data source, stick in a new SQL data source. So just drag a new data source in there, drop it in, SQL data source 1, and we can rename that. So maybe here I will say, for example, sales table data source, just to indicate that this data source will connect to the sales table in SQL Server. All right, I hope you've got that. And now switch over to design view for a second. And this is how the interface looks at this stage. We have the details view, a space, and below that space is a grid view. And down below we have two data sources. One we have been using already, employees table data source. And now you've got the sales table data source. All right, so at the next stage here, let's configure the grid view. So go through its usual tasks, go over to sales table data source, and then click on configure data source. And you can use the same connection string. So just go with my dbase connection string and then click next. So assuming you've been following along, you should already have that connection string. And now you can just specify the fact that here we want to connect to the sales table and select all the fields, the ID, emp ID, date sold, month only, amount, just because I feel like it and I want to display those basic fields in the grid view on the page. And then click on where. And here comes a crucial step for the following reason. This is where we can make the connection to keep the grid view and the details view synchronized when we work with the page. So specifically what that means is the following. For the column, choose emp ID, because that is the column shared between the sales table and employees table. For the operator, choose equals, and then for the source, choose control. And lastly, for parameter properties and then control ID, choose the one that says DV employees, and then click add. So hopefully by the end, you should see that on the bottom. It says emp ID equals @emp ID, and the value of that parameter, look at it very carefully. It says DV employees dot selected value. So this establishes the connection. It means when we select the value and the employees table essentially, and the details view in other words, then that will be used to control what's shown in the grid view. In that sense, the two will be synchronized, okay? And then click OK. And again, once you launch the page, that will seem less abstract. You'll see more clearly what that means. And also because we want to be able to, for example, delete records from the grid view, update records, and all of that, just hit on advanced, and then choose the usual generate, insert, update, and delete statements. Read it carefully. Remember, it says you must have all primary key fields selected, so make sure you have a primary key in the table, okay? In the sales table, that is. Make sure you've got that, or this will not show, or will be disabled or grayed out. Click OK. That's how it usually happens for me if I don't have a primary key. So the next stage here, take a look, click next, then click test query. All right, stick in a sample value like 1, and then hit OK. And this gives a basic result set. And when you look at it, it already tells us a lot. It tells us that employee ID is 1. You've got the ID. Now the ID, remember, is the ID of the individual record. That is different, remember, from the employee ID. Then you've got the date sold, you've got the month only, and you've got the amount. So now click finish. And the next stage is to enable some additional features on the grid view. And remember, even though we are going through this process visually, in source view, obviously this is generating a huge amount of code that we don't have to do by hand, thank God. So here I'm going to do this. I'm going to go over to enable paging, enable sorting, editing, and deleting all of those. And now let's give this a test to see what we get at the first stage. And notice that I've placed this grid view, remember. I put the grid view right under the details view. Right here. I've got this grid view, and it's right under, as you can see here, the details view. And they should both be within that panel that we added in the previous lesson. All right, let me zoom out here to a smaller level so you can see the code more. And remember, we had the update panel. We have the content template. Within that, we have the panel regular style, no update on it. Then within that, we have the details view. Then after the details view, we have a BR for space. Then we have the grid view. Then we have the closing tag on the panel. Then we've got, let me pull down a little bit, the content template closing tag. And then lastly, we have the update panel closing tag. So make sure you have things nested the same way if you want the same effects. And then lastly, remember, below that, we have some SQL data sources, as you see here. And notice that, remember, we have a second data source now. So that generates all of this. Okay? But if you look at the code, it's standard code that I think we've seen before now, with the connection string, the run at server, the delete command, insert command, select command, update command, and then a collection of parameters for deletion, insertion, and update, and updating to be more exact. If you need to pause the video, read through it, but you'll see it's stuff we've seen before. All right, so with that in place, let's give everything a launch. So let me go to design view for a second. All right, hit Google Chrome. Let's bring this baby up and see what happens. All right, so it's loading where it's supposed to be, and then I click on that. And what do we have here? Well, we have something good. First of all, notice that now the employee ID here, as you can see, is always 1, because in the details view, the first employee is selected with the ID of 1, you see? Now look very carefully. I'm going to click on 2 in terms of the paging. So on the second page, the employee ID is 4. Above, you see that's 4. Amy Hirsch, 4. And notice the employee ID for the grid view also shows 4. So they are synchronized in that fashion. This is sales information for only that one person, not for everybody. Okay, synchronized by employee ID. And we did that, as you saw. Of course, if I delete, can I delete records from here? I can. Take a look, you see? I can delete them from here if I wanted to. And then let's see, let's reload the page. Make sure that the deletion doesn't reappear. Okay, make sure you go back to, I think, 4. Or was it 3? For 3? Nope, 2. Amy, that's right. So ID 4 is on the second page. And notice the deleted records are not getting reloaded, so this is working nicely. And of course, can we edit? So hit edit. And what are the things that you can edit here? Well, notice that here you can edit the employee ID. Now you may want to ask yourself, would that be a good idea? Because this is based, for example, on what came from there. I don't know, that's up to you, okay? Maybe, somebody could mistype it. Again, you would have to think about that more carefully. I'm just going to leave it. All right, but imagine I change the amount here to a different value and then hit update. Make sure that this takes and it looks as though that value has been changed, right? I've entered a new one. Reload the page. Remember, this is the second page of data. So go over to 2 on the pager. All right, and it's saved, as you can see. There, you see? All right, so everything is working quite well. Close that. And the last bit is to add a bit of formatting. And to do the formatting, what I mean, remember, is see the date sold. We want to make it look like a short date. So it says something like 11/14/2017. And for the amount, we want to make that formatting as currency, okay? So make sure you select the grid view and then go down to edit columns. And the next stage here, from these down below where it says selected fields, get rid of the ID, we don't need that. And then make sure you select the date sold and make that into a template so you can edit it. and select the amount and make that into a template so you can edit it. So the amount and the date sold fields you make into editable templates. And then click OK. And at the next stage, to actually do the editing. So in other words, we want the amount field to display a currency symbol, and we want the date sold to display the short date without that 12 o'clock a.m. You see that? So to do that, switch over into source view. And this time, we're going to do the source view only. Okay? So as you can see, there's a lot of code here. It can be a bit overwhelming. Well, you got to look through it carefully, that's all, and pick out what you need. All right, first of all, I can break this over some vertical lines. All right. And what we need for the date sold is the following. Let's take a look here. Let me just break this up. It will be too confusing. Okay, so make sure that you are under this one that says date sold. The header text is date sold. And now there are two options. You've got the edit item template. You can leave that one as it is. And the one that does matter is the item template. So again, I got to break this up or it won't be visible. See how Visual Studio has a habit sometimes of jumping? It can do very strange things. Well, go figure, Visual Studio, huh? Okay, let me get back there. So I need to break this up over multiple lines. Like that. So make sure that you are here at this place where it says template field, header text, date sold, and then down below, make sure that you are going to make a change to the one that says item template. In other words, here, item template, this block. So it's the item template for the date sold field. And now over here, you see where it says date sold, there's a function called bind. And it basically obviously gets the data, right? And then sticks it into this label here and displays it. That's all. Okay, remember that the grid view looks very sophisticated, but ultimately it's just a collection of simple controls. So for display purposes, you see the item template just basically uses a label, which you can make use of yourself if you wanted to. It's just a label. Right, run at server, and then the text, as you can see, is generated by going into SQL Server and using this function called bind. So to make it format the output as a date, so you're going to do this, put a comma, and then between double quotes, put 0:d for short date. So this is a basic format specifier, d, colon, and then you've got 0, that's the index, and then this goes between curly braces, an opening and a closing one as always, and then of course those go between the double quotes. So this simply means in English, format the date sold as an example 10/24/2017, short date. That's what it means. All right, make sure you're doing this to the item template now. Down below, I'm going to pull down again and look for the amount information. So let me see, I got to break this up here over multiple lines. All right, that's that, that's that, that's that. Text. Okay, good. Under the item template, let's see what we've got here. Okay, hold on, that broke not quite the way I wanted it to break. I need to fix that. There you go, that's better. So make sure you are now going to work on the item template under the template field with the header text of amount. Okay? So item template under the amount header text. And then down below for the bind, you're going to apply a new format specifier. So type comma, double quotes, and then between curly braces type 0, and then colon, and then C for currency. So what this means is simply format the amount displayed in the page as currency. That's it. That's what it means. All right, go back to design view for a second. And when you look at it, it pretty much looks that way now. You've got the date sold, as you can see, without the time anymore, so that's applied. You've got the amount, and they stick in some artificial values, but the point is that that column now has dollar symbols, so it looks good. And lastly, let's give this a run. So hit Google Chrome. Give it a sec to load here. All right, click on Show Details. Let that load, and everything is nicely formatted. You can delete records as usual. Okay, and so on. You can edit the records. When you edit, notice that the amount is then displayed as just a number without the fancy formatting. The formatting is superficial. It's basically applied at the page level, right? When you edit, it looks like this. And the only thing to be left here perhaps is this. Shut it down for a second. And the last bit, make sure you enable paging and sorting. Just make sure that's visible. I must have turned it off by mistake at some point. Okay, launch this again. And you want to make sure that the sorting is working correctly, specifically because we have the currency symbol applied. All right, so expand show details. Okay, move it over here. Click on amount. All right, so this is 207.72. So now it's sorted, as you can see, from lowest to highest. But if I click on it again, it gets sorted from highest to lowest in the amount column. Okay, and remember that the grid view works on a per employee ID basis. So if I switch to a new employee, as you can see, it's going to show you that same information in terms of sorting, but obviously different records, right, for that second employee. Let me close that. And that is it. I'm going to leave it here, and I'll see you in the next one. Remember, I take the project, I zip it up, and I stick it under lesson resources.